Hello, this is Gloomy Sunday, and once again, I will be sharing spooky stories that will send shivers down your thorny spine. Without further ado, let's begin tonight's creepy, spooky, and sometimes outlandish array of tales. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. This is a true story. Believe at your risk. It is kind of long. It is said that my grandpa's ancestors had cursed the line of boys in our family. All the boys who were descendants of my grandpa, and even before my grandpa when the curse was activated, would die before they reached the old age. I wasn't even born when my grandpa passed away, but I've heard them retell it over and over. It was an odd death. He was only in his 60s. He had tripped over the TV's electrical cord and fell down a flight of stairs. He survived that, but he didn't survive the heart attack the fall had put him through. He died suddenly like that. To this day, my grandma still scolds us about leaving out our shoes everywhere and not hiding cords well because she's afraid of tripping into her death. The curse was not made aware to us kids. We lived our lives growing up happily and carefree. It wasn't until my uncle, we'll call him Willie, when word about the curse was revived. It was 2004. My dad and mom, and my uncle Willie and his wife were going to spend the summer in Thailand. My uncle had other intentions. He wanted to see his old ex-girlfriend, the girlfriend he promised he would come back for when he left to the US. But then he had met and married my aunt instead. He had broken up with my aunt in Thailand and stolen all the thousands of money they had brought with them, determined to get back to his first love, leaving my aunt in tears and no way to get back home. She was with my parents though, and my dad told her not to worry as he and my mom would help her get back home. And so they left when the end of summer approached, my parents backing my aunt and leaving my uncle Willie in Thailand to venture for his girlfriend. When he returned to his girlfriend's village, he was relayed the unfortunate news that she had passed away years ago. Now, the family was forcing him to marry the younger sister. He dated her for a little bit, but after he realized his mistake of having left his wife that had helped him and been with him through thick and thin and leaving behind his wonderful family of kids, he didn't want to marry her anymore. The family of his ex-girlfriend was enraged and, as he fled and tried to return back to the US, the family put a vicious curse on him. His soul was already taken when he returned to the US. A year later, as a psychic medium lady would tell us after the passing of my own father, used as a ragdoll by the demon to taunt and tease us. My uncle had lost everything now, a fresh divorcee with the spirit of his ex-girlfriend and demon clinging to him. My dad and Uncle Willie's younger brother, Uncle Harry, would soon rent out one of his apartments for my Uncle Wilt. From his loneliness, he requested that us kids, me and my little brother, Uncle Willie's son, my cousin, around my age, and Uncle Willie's grandkid, my cousin's son, around my little brother's age, to sleep over at his house every weekend. I was a naive kid and so were all four of us kids. We went every weekend like he wanted us. I can still remember his smile when he came to pick us up, and one day when I didn't go for the weekend, he came unannounced to pick me up with my cousin, nephew, and little brother at 8 p.m. at night. It was odd, but I went nonetheless, and he would buy us McDonald's like he would whenever he picked us up. Nothing made sense as to why he would disappear as we played for hours in the two-bedroom apartment, all four of us kids cooped up in one room with Yu-Gi-Oh cards, a PlayStation, and 2 airbeds. He wouldn't appear when we called for him, only showing up when we called for him more than once or to just check up on us every so often. It only made sense and clicked in my mind later when the psychic medium lady told us that the demon had grasped him, cloaking him from everyone as he sat on the lone couch in his small living room apartment watching us run back and forth trying to find him. He was only visible to his eldest son, my uncle's expression always surprised and asking him, "You can see me?" when his son sat by him on the couch and started talking to him like you would father-son. Once, when my cousin and I were hungry, we found a pack of mac and cheese in my Uncle Willie's cupboard. We giggled and teased as we cooked, only to be startled when my Uncle Wilt scolded us for being too loud before he disappeared out the front door again. It must have been to the basement. My Uncle Willie took his own life by hanging himself in the basement of the apartments. That weekend, his kids had come over to cook for him. Myself, my little brother, the rest of my siblings, and my parents had gone out of town to visit my mom's side of the family. Not one of my Uncle Willie's kids could find him, so they sent one of their brothers, not the eldest, to go search. He reached the basement door but it wouldn't budge open. The doorknob stuck no matter how hard he tried to jiggle it or twist it. Giving up, he returned back up the stairs. Again, another one of the brothers went to the basement door to try to open it. No luck. The only one who could open it was my Uncle Willie's eldest son, the doorknob twisting easily in his grasp, unlike how it did with the last two brothers. With goosebumps as they looked at each other, the brothers ran down the flights of stairs to the basement and, you guessed it, he discovered his father's hanging body. As the cops would later tell us and the psychic would tell us again, she was never there, yet she described everything so precisely. The suicide didn't look like a suicide. The detective said that the chair my Uncle Willie was standing on was kicked much too far. They concluded that someone had to have been down there with him, but no one was downstairs at all. The psychic told us that my uncle was going to take the rope off from around his neck, having contemplated suicide and practiced putting the rope around his neck countless times. The demon, angered that my uncle was about to overcome him, shoved the chair and made my uncle commit his own death. It lined with the police investigation as to why the chair didn't look like he had kicked it. A shaman lady who was living underneath the apartment of my uncle was surprised to find out someone was living upstairs. She shared with us that she had seen a tiger wandering up and down the steps endlessly. Hence, her assumption that no one was living upstairs when in fact, my Uncle Willie was. A few months after the event, we were having a party at my house. The kids were playing downstairs, the adults in the living room, the teen 20-year-old cousins and moms in the kitchen. The phone had rang. My sister picked it up and immediately burst into tears. My cousin, the daughter of my Uncle Willie, creased her eyebrows together and took over the phone from my sister only to erupt into tears. "It's my dad," she stuttered out, having immediately recognized the voice. It wasn't a voice, just a long ooh as if he was trying to speak but he couldn't because the rope had snapped his neck. My dad, angered suddenly, immediately took over the phone. In Thai, he said, "Do not call the home phone. You're scaring the kids. If you want to talk, call me on my cell." My father hung up. Someone relayed the news to us kids downstairs and we had ran upstairs, scared. A cold chill had run along all of us that night, goosebumps forming on our arms and people crying. My sister says she can still remember the sound of his voice to this day, having heard the sounds of tormented souls in the background screeching and crying. My dad went out onto the porch, listening into his cell phone and conversing in the dark. He never shared with us what my uncle said, only saying that my uncle had wanted to talk to my aunt, his ex-wife. A few years later, my dad was wearing my Uncle Willie's leather coat. He always wore it, every day. He stuffed his hands in and out of every pocket more than 20 times a day. He was stunned when, one day, a note was sitting in his pocket. It was a crinkled piece of paper, having never been there before. He opened it up and read it. It dedicated to my Uncle Willie's kids, primarily for the youngest kid, my cousin who was my age. My father read it to us when we had come back from school, having just found the note after getting off work himself. It basically said how much my Uncle Willie loved the kids and cherished them. My uncle had died in his mid-50s, the ancestral curse winning another point and making another reign. Now I will tell the story about my dad. I completely forgot about it until now, so excuse some confusing parts because I typed it quickly. I read some of the comments and someone asked how we fixed the curse and how the curse came to be. I have no idea how the curse came to be, unfortunately, but I can explain how we fixed it. I'll explain now. My father passed away in October a few years ago. It was such an unexpected death. No one was ready or prepared to brace for it. My father had come back on a Thursday night after hunting nearly all week by himself. This time, he was taking my mom, my older brother Vincent, my 13-year-old brother Tyrone, and my 1-year-old brother at the time, James, all fake names of course, with him since it was the weekend. I had a gnawing feeling that night to say I love you, Dad, but I never did. I had the opportunity to, but I couldn't bring myself to do it, considering I'm not a very mushy type of person. Yes, I know, I should have just said it and I will forever regret it. It was raining extremely hard that Saturday morning when my dad had not come to pick up my brother at his hunting place. Vincent knew something was wrong, considering my dad had just called him a couple hours ago to let him know that he was going to put bait down for the deer. It doesn't take that long though. Vincent, now concerned, got down from the tree and a close family friend had come to pick him up as they were all hunting together that weekend. They went searching and found my dad's car parked to the side of one of the smaller roads that connect to the main road. Everything was there, from my dad's walkie-talkie, phone, guns, and his wallet. No, this couldn't be it. Vincent thought. My dad usually takes everything with him. Luckily in the morning, my brother had encountered a ranger who had given him his number in case something happened. Because it was raining and the search could take hours, the rangers had their dogs with them. No worries, the rangers assured my brother and family friend positively. Dogs can smell better in rain. It didn't make sense to Vincent, considering the dogs had gone miles north of my dad's car to the river before stopping on Saturday, only to find that my dad's body was just 20 to 30 feet to the west of my dad's car under a pile of leaves on Sunday morning. I, of course, had spent most of the day in the hotel room watching over my two little brothers Tyrone and James. Living in Wisconsin, the first thing that had popped into all of my siblings and I's heads was that it was a hate crime. We had every reason to suspect because of an earlier dispute my dad and View had with a white man. It was far from that case scenario though. My dad was pronounced dead on a Sunday morning after Saturday had been spent in the state forest, it crawling with rangers, policemen, and family and friends trying to find his body among the expanses of wilting wildlife. As the medical examiner would later tell us, my father had been attempting to climb a 10 to 15-story tree. Because it was raining so hard, he had lost his footing and plummeted down, hitting a large log and then rolling down some. He wasn't able to get up or call for help because of the ribs he had broken and the trauma to his head. He was probably dead upon impact of the log to his head or semi-conscious for just a little while, she told my mom. I like to believe that he died immediately though, considering it'd be less painful in my head than to imagine him lying awake on the cold, empty forest floor thinking about the young children he had to leave behind. I had left before I could see the body, my mom telling me to go home with my baby brother James and my eldest sister Julia. My other sister Sandra, though, was adamant to see my dad's body. She came to my aunt's house in tears, explaining how he looked in detail as she cried into her arms. Half his face looked like it had been crushed, shriveled like a prune because of the puddle that had formed around him. Grey, she cried out. He was grey and cold and hard, unlike the warm, fleshy, bright father who I had just seen 3 to 4 days ago before everything happened. By now, the week that followed involved intense meetings at our house by the clan members and church. People who knew my father dropped by to comfort us and help us, and family and friends from all over the U.S. were flying in for the weekend filled with darkness and grief. It was a sudden funeral, so most family stayed at our house. My dad's sister described to us how hard she cried that she almost fainted. She was the closest to my dad, always calling him for advice and so forth. The night he died, he visited her, as she claims. My aunt and uncle were just laying in bed and, again, my aunt was starting to cry feverishly. Suddenly, there were knocks on their bedroom window as if rocks were being thrown. Concerned, they got up to go look, only to see a bird. A bird would usually fly away as you approach, but this one didn't. It sat on the sill, watching them as they came near, and, when near was close enough to just reach out and grasp the bird in your hand, it flew away. My cousin, on the other hand, just a year older than me, described to us about how my dad had entered his dreams. He was looking for James, my cousin told us as we sat quietly around the dinner table. He was asking me if I knew where everyone went because he can't find your mom or James. I didn't tell him though. Good, my mom nodded, consumed with a depression. We don't want James to get sick. If he visits you again, don't tell him, or else his spirit will stick around. He needs to get going and move on now. After Saturday night service, there was a family meeting at my house. The living room cramped and got hot in the middle of October from all the bodies in one, usually large but now small, space. There was a psychic who was my dad's cousin, the psychic that I mentioned just briefly in the first part of my story. She had come from Minnesota upon hearing of his death, and now, she gathered us together to tell us the spiritual side of my father's death. You can believe me or not, this is what God gave for me to see, she explains. Yes, it was raining hard that day, but it was not the rain that made my father trip. It was the evil spirits, grabbing my father by his ankles and pulling him down. She explains to us how it was Lucifer who had stomped on my father's face, crushing it as my father struggled to survive. The demons were dragging my father, trying to pull him under to hell, but my father fought them with all his might. Lucifer saw it, my brother and uncle approaching the car, and so that bastard, quote unquote, exactly what the psychic says, cloaked my dad's scent. That's why the dogs went north and never west, because they couldn't smell the scent of my dad's clothes, as Lucifer had made sure of it. Asking hunters around the area, The medical examiner explained to my mom how everyone had packed up and gone back home around my dad's accident because it sounded like the devil was coming, the thunder crackling and whipping and the rain coming down harder than ever. My father prayed to God. The psychic continues on to my bewildered family, and God, who became immensely upset that Lucifer had foul played with a life, blowed 3 times. Powerful gusts of wind, they were, shoving the demons and Lucifer away from my father. It was too late though, to Lucifer's grin. He had won. My father took his last breath and the cloak Lucifer had put down was gone. But by then, the Saturday search was over. Now, no one really believes the psychic after she explains it. We actually sit there, completely stunned, because how can you not believe her when she explains things revolving around my uncle from the first story when she was never there to see it in the first place? When it was only family that knew the detective reports. How can she explain my father's appearance when she had only come for the funeral, not the search party, and his face had been fixed by then? It's hard not to believe her, considering her explanation lines with the physical properties of the story. There is a curse in your family, she continues on, not leaving us one moment to gather ourselves. And today, we are going to break it so another life in this family will not be taken. We probably prayed for an hour, her voice so strong, powerful, and mighty as she held our hands and blessed us. After the prayer was over, she explained how, now, the curse had gone into my father and that he was the last one the curse shall claim. There are only 2 uncles left in my family now. One of them is now dead to my family as his obsessed, consumed with a darkness directed towards my cousins and my siblings, and I for the loss of his 2 older brothers. It's not just that, but his heart is completely dark and filled with an evil so rich and thick, even I'm scared for his family. The other uncle is too far from Wisconsin, but, to my cousins and my siblings and I who are fatherless, he's the only sane uncle my family has left. Wow, that was a wild story, very spooky and bewildering. I hope you enjoyed our spooky and strange stories. Join us next time for more. Take care and boo.